Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Music Den. I'm your host, Armando Venditti. Hoping you guys are having a good day. And above all else, that you are looking after yourselves and one another. Ladies and gentlemen, before I get into the topic of yet another fantastic episode, I want to welcome back to the channel Mr. Jim Bricker. How's it going, Jim?
Doing well, Armando. Happy to be back.
Happy that you're back. And the one and only Mr. Ken Cheshire. How's it going, Ken?
It's going well, Armando. It's so good to be back with you guys.
Good to have you back. Ken cannot keep a straight face, ladies and gentlemen, which
Space for radio.
which is great. Yeah, I had the same thing. Ladies and gentlemen, today jazz masterpieces. And the album we're going to be discussing is Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. Now, a few weeks back, Jim had suggested that we do an episode on Kind of Blue and discuss why this album is considered by music journalists, reviewers, as one of the all-time great jazz albums. So, you know what? I thought, let's give it a shot. Okay. Now, Jim has agreed to take the reins on this episode and lead us into a intellectual, scintillating, fascinating discussion on Kind of Blue and why this album could be considered a jazz masterpiece. Now, just to give you a bit of background on Kind of Blue, released August 17th, 1959, recorded March 2nd and April 22nd, 1959. Produced by Irving Townsend, has a playing time of 45 minutes and 44 seconds, and Kind of Blue did achieve 5 times platinum status in the US. And in terms of its playing style, it's listed as modal jazz. Okay. Now, Jim is going to take over and we're going to discuss Kind of Blue. Go for it.
Okay, I will try to take over, and I've assembled lots of different sources from lots of different places on the interwebs and books and different things to try to get across, um, why it's held in such high regard. Um, we did kind of talk about this album actually about a half a year ago or so in our 31 Perfect Albums series, where this was my first choice, covering them chronologically for perfect albums. So, um, yeah, Kind of Blue has gotten some airplay on the channel before, but this is a pretty deep dive. Um, Armando, you spoke about the fact that, one of the things that makes Kind of Blue so different is that it's based on modal jazz, which is different than, I'll just say, how jazz is kind of normally done, where instead of a soloist going over the chord changes of a song, and by chord changes, what I mean is, if you take Someday My Prince Will Come, everyone knows that song. And, da, 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 da. I mean, during the solo sections, people would solo over all of those chord changes, that happens within that entire main phrase of the melody. Um, don't ask me what those chords are. Um, Modal jazz is basically where people will improvise over scales or different modes rather than the chordal changes that happen under the melody. The benefit of this is that it gives the musicians a lot more freedom to explore melody and mood, and it just makes for a more open and fluid sound that's not kind of hemmed in by the structure of the standard melody of the head of the tune. Um, so that's kind of the grand summary of what's different about Kind of Blue. So just to get into the background here, um, up to this point, the Davis Band was playing a mixture of, pop standards and blues and bebop originals by, the usual gang of suspects. Parker, Monk, Dizzy, Tad Dameron, Davis, wrote some of these himself. And again, a lot of what they were doing was all based on the standard bebop approach, which is improvising over the chord changes. Um, Things began to change musically around 1953 with the publication of a book called Lydian Chromatic Concept of Tonal Organization. And this was written by composer and theorist George Russell.
Easy for
And
you
what
to
he
say.
did, what's that?
Easy for you to say. That's a long
Easy for you
title.
to say.
Yeah.
Exactly. So both Davis and Gil Evans, who was a major contributor to the Davis circle, they both fell in love with this book. And what Lydian chromatic concept of tonal organization offered was basically talking about abandoning traditional major and minor key relationships and just getting into this whole idea of chord and scale unity. And this was one of the very first books to explore what he called the vertical relationships between chords and scales. It's the insights that Russell put forth in this book that really helped lead the way towards modal jazz. Miles his first experimented with this with the tune Milestones, which was the title track off a 1958 album, which is dun 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 dun. I mean, I'm off melodically, forgive me, but that whole idea of where they would get to the solo sections, he instructed the players to operate based on modes, and I'll get into what modes are in a little bit. Anyway, Davis was very happy with the results of Milestones, so much so that he wanted to, do a whole album on it. And he worked very closely, not with Gil Evans, but with Bill Evans. Bill is a pianist around that time who was really starting to make waves because of his approach towards music, and he was really influenced by George Russell's book as well. Um, in fact, Evans was a part of Miles Davis's sextet around that time, um, which was Miles, John Coltrane on tenor sax, Cannonball Adderley on alto sax, Paul Chambers on bass, Jimmy Cobb on drums. Um, Evans was part of that sextet combo, I guess, for about 12 months or so. But he ended up leaving the band because he was just not really happy with what was going on musically. He had his own pastures that he wanted to explore and left Davis's group. But Miles was able to convince Bill Evans to come back and to be part of these sessions. And these were the last sessions that Bill would play as part of Miles. There are other recordings out there that are both live and in studio from Evans's time with Miles Davis Sextet. But I just want to underscore what a key component Bill Evans is to making Kind of Blue work. So so let's kind of talk about modality a bit more.
Mhm.
So um, I, there are many different modes within music, and by many, there's really seven that I know of from the research that I've done: Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian. And what it is about these modes is that they kind of have um, their own adjective that you can apply to them. Things played in the Ionian mode sound very bright. Dorian can be pretty heavy. Phrygian, dark. Lydian, ethereal. Mixolydian can be kind of exotic. And then sad and foreboding are adjectives that are applied to the Aeolian and the Locrian scales. So what Miles basically did is say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to set up this tune. Here's the head, and then for all you guys, I want you to go through, for example, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, and Mixolydian. Go as long as you want within those modes, but you have to nail all those modes. And then when you get to Mixolydian and you're done with whatever you want to do with it, then you can hand it off to the next cat and off he goes.
Mhm.
So that's basically the construct of how Davis put these together. And really, that was it. I mean, aside from the sheet music, which sketches out the head of each tune, the main melody, it was just open from there. And so it's this kind of spontaneity and this freedom to just play within the modes that really helps make Kind of Blue as special as it is because I used the term pastures earlier. It just gives each soloist this broad, wide field to kind of run in to to kind of state what they want to state within that song, within that mode. So before I get too far from that, Ken, is there anything else about modes that that should be added here?
Not really. I think when we talk about modes, for instance, I think a lot of people are familiar with um, songs being in major or minor. This is the same thing, except it's a different combination of intervals between the notes. Just like you mentioned characteristics of the different modes, most songs in a major key are more update. Most songs, pop, rock, whatever, that are in a minor key tend to be a little bit, have that sadder feel to it. So it really is just an expansion of the major and minor tonality. The wonderful irony of modal compositions, especially in jazz, is it's a very specific structure. So you've got this combination of structure that also allows for a lot of freedom at the same time. So whereas freestyle jazz, you've got the freedom to go wherever you want to go. Um, this kind of has the same thing, but it still is within a structure. And this is probably what appeals to my ear as far as modal jazz. So, so yeah, you're spot on. Um, yeah.
Okay, so I guess one of the main things then, thank you, Ken. One of the main things that makes um, So What, or sorry, Kind of Blue so special, So What is the first tune, is that it really didn't sound like much else that was out there at the time. And it still doesn't today. Of course, other people have done things modally, but there's just something about the the crack team that Davis put together for this and just what they were able to do that just really produced, this kind of musical masterpiece that hasn't been, equaled, within this format. So let's talk about the tracks on the album. So there's 5 tracks on here.
Hmm.
Album starts off with So What, which is the tune that probably most people recognize. It's got this whole set of, 5 note figures, which are kind of handled in rubato time. And rubato is the musical term for it's like without time. There's no set tempo that it's going to. It's just free of any constraints around time. Um, so you start off with these 5 note figures. Then there's this slinky interlude um, you know, where the piano and the bass wander together that just leads, unexpectedly into this small bass solo.
Hmm.
And then it's kind of into that famous, 8 note riff. Ba-dum, 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 ba. And it's like you're and I liken it to like you're wandering through a dark forest where you don't know what's going on. You've got these rubato figures, you've got just this bass
See,
and piano just kind of playing off one another.
see, in
And
my
then,
notes I have here, tranquil vibe, really relaxed pace for the
yeah,
piece. That-
yeah. It,
That's
and
my dumbed down version of saying what you were saying in terms of what I'm hearing. So yeah.
well, to me, and the piece is kind of it's mysterious, it's laid back, you don't really know what's going on, and there's a little bit of unease, but
Yeah.
then you get that 8 note bass figure, and then the bum bum, and it's like a shaft of sunlight just breaking through, providing some order to what's going on.
Hmm.
Um, and then you've got Miles and Train and Cannonball coming in on their solos, and these solos, they're just all over the place. They they tease, they hug, they dance, and they sprint because again, the guys are all free to do whatever they want within the structure of those modes. And again, I wasn't able to come up with exactly which modes were followed in which tunes, but the structure is there on all the tracks
Well,
of Kind of Blue.
I should say too that these pieces are quite lengthy. I mean, you're looking at, from the shortest track is like 5 minutes and 27 seconds to 11 minutes and 33 seconds. So it's quite expansive in terms of the
Hmm.
music that's on here, in terms of the journey they take you on
Hmm.
overall. So
Yeah,
And the
and it's
amazing thing about it is for me is I never looked at the how long the album was, just because I get so involved in it. It's like all of a sudden it's over,
yeah,
and I don't realize it's been 45 minutes.
yeah, I get you.
yeah.
If if I didn't look at it and say how long is this album, I probably would have said probably around 30 minutes, maybe more.
All right,
Yeah,
no, I get you. All
I
right,
didn't capture it.
enjoyed you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very the way the tunes come off, it's very different than even a lot of jazz albums because there is a lack of dynamics, except for the soloing,
Hmm.
because you're abandoning the standard chordal sequences. Not everyone is going to know that here's where you crash and go up because they're really just reading completely off of what one another is doing.
Yeah.
All they know is that they're going to begin here, they're going to end here, and when if Miles named Cannonball as the final soloist, when Cannonball was done, they were going to wind their way back to the main theme, which is
Yeah.
just but a sketch of something. It's just a wisp.
Yeah.
So again, it's that sort of ambiguity and freedom that makes Kind of Blue just so enigmatic. I mean, you can probably write this stuff down and notate it note for note and put it in front of a group of musicians to play, but it wouldn't have the freedom. I think it's just that complete spontaneity that allows for, the looseness to happen.
Hmm.
And again, I'm not I what I know about music is what I've read. I don't play. So I couldn't really tell you how it is to go from an A flat to a B flat seven, or what it means to go to a you know major sixth or something. I just don't know what that means unless someone says, oh, this piece of music when it goes from here to here to here, that's going from a dominant root fifth to something else. It's like, oh, okay. When I read it, it's just Greek to me unless I know the music and I'm reading along to it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ken.
One of the
Help
things I
me.
really like about this is that um, you used that as an example at the beginning of the video of um, jazz based on song tunes like Someday My Prince Will Come. On this album, it's it's great because it does have themes like that melody, except they're more like leitmotifs. And
Hmm.
the amazing thing is they make small leitmotifs very interesting. Four notes, two notes, the whole ba-dum, just two notes. And it's very distinct. It's um they repeat it in many different ways and forms. And so they're not counting on, a 12 note melody to do that. And I find it as I just find it fascinating and part of the hypnotic. I mean, they're going by. a pattern or a theory of less is more on this album.
Yep.
And
Okay, I can hear that.
like I say, I am hardly a jazz expert. Jim, you know much more than I do. If this is primarily characteristic of modal jazz as a form, then I need to do some more digging into modal jazz, because honestly, the freestyle, the free form, it's hit or miss, for me. But anyway, um, and I just absolutely adore Bill Evans's work on this album. I adore
Yeah.
Bill Evans anyway. I would buy an album of him feeding his cat. It's just
Feeding his cat. That's a good one. Okay. Well,
especially if it's a box set,
Yep.
because you get the whole feeding experience.
Anything else you want to say about
Thank
that?
you very much. I appreciate your indulgence. Yeah.
carry
Will
on,
do.
Jim.
All right. Well, let's leave Bill and his feline friends aside, and let's continue with the album at hand.
Please do.
Um, so Freddie Freeloader, which is the second tune on the album, is, a 12 bar blues, but they're really tweaking how they sort of come back to the form. At the
Yes.
very end of the phrase, the turnaround, there's an unexpected chordal change or a variation there that sort of gets it back to the head. So it feels like a blues, but again, knowing Miles, he has to screw with it a little bit. This is the one track on the album that does not have Bill Evans. Davis brought in Wynton Kelly, who is much more of a blues specialist, and he really kind of
Really
shines
does.
on this track. But again, it's modal like the others are. They're just doing it within sort of the blues form, at least at the head and at the ending of it.
Yeah.
Um, Comments around that, gents?
I
What
just,
you heard?
in my notes, I have for Freddie Freeloader, great swing feel, just a great tempo
Hmm.
throughout the whole track. And peppery piano. It's like, little piano
Yeah.
stabs here and there. That's what I'm hearing. So again,
Yeah.
I'm a novice. I'm not an expert on jazz whatsoever. This is virgin territory for me. So I'm giving you my uh, cliff notes and what I know of what I'm hearing. So
Hmm.
please continue, my dear boy.
Well, I want to see if Ken has anything to add for Freddie.
No, it's gold.
Yeah. Okay. So then we come to the end of side one with the track Blue and Green. Now, I
Mm.
think many people will argue that So What is the best known tune from this album.
I would say, yeah,
It leads it off. It's very simple. Ba-na, ba-da, 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 ba-da. However, Blue and Green is the thing that sort of elevates this album into the untouchable. I mean, I don't know what it is about this. It it's a very ephemeral tune.
it's the
You
piano
know,
for it
It's the
on it.
piano.
yeah, it's just this wisp of a thing that kind of feels like more of like an idea than an actual piece of music. It's like if you try to, it
I,
just
I,
feels like if you reach for it and try to hold it, it will break. It's just
I,
such a
I'll tell
fragile,
you,
delicate thing.
I'll tell you what it is for me. It's the piano and it's a sultry trumpet on it.
Yep.
That's what I hear. And that's what makes it for me. That's what I like about it.
Yeah, it's just this delicate ballad of a piece.
Mhm.
Um, and there is a bit of controversy around is this a piece that was,
Right.
composed by Evans? Was it composed by Davis? Is it a collaboration of the two? Um, but yeah, this is again to me, it's like the entire heart of the album rests on this piece of music. Um, Side
It's
two,
fantastic. It's fantastic. It's got to be said.
oh yeah, I'm trying to kind of come up with other tunes that sound like it and feel like it. And you know, the closest thing I can come to is like maybe Peace off of Bill Evans' album, Everybody Digs Bill Evans,
Yeah.
which again is this gentle ballad that just feels like it's, come down from God. I mean, it's just it's got it's ephemeral. That's the best word I can use to talk about it. Um,
Mhm. I would say
so
ethereal, but I understand. Mm.
mhm, yeah, and ethereal might even be a better word than ephemeral. But
Yeah.
let's flip the record over, shall we?
Side
Um,
two. Step into the B side. Go ahead.
yes, B side track one, all blues, um, which it's what it is, but it's a blues tune that again is instantly it just sucks you in. Just this, repeating piano motif and this light drum work that's going on in the bum, 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 bum. I mean, again, that's sort of the basics of the melody that that Davis had sketched out, and there is a more proper melody that's on top of it. But again, it's just a small head of a tune, and the whole rest of it are these solos based on the modes that Davis had called out. Same structure. Once you've finished going through the mode I told you to do, hand it off to Coltrane, hand it off to Cannonball, hand it off to Bill, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's
And
just yeah.
it's again, it's not a tune that has a lot of dynamics except within the solos. So Coltrane will kind of go, all over the place while staying within tempo and while staying within the mode. And that's where I think a lot of the genius and the variety lay within this is what they're able to do within the structure that they've been given.
What I think what makes it a good piece is each musician is adding their own color to the piece,
Hmm.
their own sort of musical stamp to what's there. So,
Yeah. Yeah. A trained ear is going to be able to pull out Cannonball versus Coltrane, and I still can't nail it every time, but they are definitely not
yeah,
aping one another.
yeah.
Um, Ken?
Yeah, it's very hypnotic. This is a really good example uh, of blues in 6/8 time. You know, and of course he's established this 6/8 meter previous in the album, but if I were ever to try to explain what that waltz like blues thing is, I
Hmm.
would play them this. It's a perfect example.
Yeah,
Um, it's magic.
it is. Absolutely. So, I had stated earlier that I wasn't able to kind of come up with all the different modes that are going on with these songs, with the exception of the final track, Flamenco Sketches, which is another
Uh-huh.
deep, deep down ballad where it's even more open. Again, that there is definitely a line that the piano, bass, and drums are taking, and Miles just has this very brief solo melodic take that he does. So it's not anything in unison with the saxes. He's just doing his own take on the melody, and then we get into the five scales that Miles has asked everyone to go into. So first is yeah. So okay, Ken, if you've got the letter A in music notation and a small b after it, is that like A minor?
And A with a small B, the B is usually in place of a flat
Okay, so it's A flat.
because most word processors don't have the flat, so they just use a lowercase b.
Okay, thank you. So
A
so in
flat.
that case, the five
That's an A
modes
minor. Okay.
The five modes here are C, key of C Ionian, key of A flat Mixolydian,
Okay.
key of B flat Ionian.
Okay.
Fourth mode is the key of D and it's Phrygian, or what's
Hmm.
called the flamenco.
Yeah.
And then finally, the last one is in G M, and is if it's G M, is that
G
major
minor.
or minor? Sorry,
Minor.
minor.
G
G
minor.
minor Dorian. Now,
Hmm.
my question to you, Ken, is that is G minor always associated with the Dorian mode, or is it just a way of kind of combining the two? Okay,
Yeah.
okay, gotcha.
It has a
So
lower. It has the third of the mode is lowered by a half step.
I I was told there would be no math. I'm sorry, I
There you
can't
go.
follow you here. Um, so
I
that's
could make it harder, but I
well, if you can make it accurate, make it harder. Go for it.
well, no, that was quite accurate. So you're
Okay.
good.
You're doing great.
Okay, so anyway, that's flamenco sketches and so here's what I'm confused about, Ken, and this is I'm going to ask you
Okay.
to put your music nerd hat on. So, um Davis was telling his people to go through modes. So what thank you. What I when so how can you go through an Ionian mode even though you're being told to play it in C? Because that would seem to follow a chordal structure
Be,
as opposed to a
because
mode.
because the root would be in C as opposed any mode. A mode is basically a scale, and
Hmm.
it starts the root. The so if it's in what key did you say?
C Ionian.
C Ionian. So it's an Ionian scale where the root note is C.
Okay. So if the root note is C, is that where that's where you start?
If you were to play the scale from the bottom to the top, yeah.
And a scale is always eight notes.
In Western music, yeah.
Fair enough. Okay.
Okay.
So it's likely then that Davis was telling these guys start with, start with B flat and go play whatever you want to within that mode before you go to the next one.
Well, it wouldn't necessarily have to start, but I mean they could start on the third or the fourth or the fifth, but
Gotcha.
the scale that they're working within is in C or B flat or D or whatever. So yeah.
Gotcha.
Do you?
Barely. I'm barely
Okay.
hanging on, but
Barely is
I
enough.
understand.
You're doing
Barely is
Well,
enough.
fine. You know
so
more than
so
me.
so if you're starting in the A, in the key of A, and you're starting at the third, does that mean you're starting on C?
Yes.
You're
C sharp.
okay, got it. That much math I can understand.
Hey.
Hey, so Armando, any comments regarding flamenco sketches?
In all honesty, no. I'm like what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm.
There's really not much for me to contribute because this is all brand new to me, and
Mm-hmm.
I honestly don't want to come across as a numbskull, to put it politely.
I get it.
You left it out to hang me out to dry to be portrayed as the numbskull.
Well, and that's just it.
There you go. No,
For
but
instance, if I ignore all my musical training for flamenco sketches, what comes to mind first is atmosphere. It is a deeply, for me, it's a deeply
atmospheric piece.
atmospheric piece, which has nothing to do with music theory or whatever. It's
Makes
just
you
the way
feel.
that it
Yeah.
strikes me. So yeah,
Yeah, and I've, I when I first heard Kind of Blue, which was in college, and I'm gonna ping it to like 85 or 86, I enjoyed it. It's very approachable, it's very open, but it's, the more you listen to it, the more things unlock and avail themselves, and you're really able to appreciate it more deeply
think
for
so.
what it is, especially as you listen to other kinds of music and you come back to this and you're like, this is just so different. What is it about this that just makes it so, that ingrains itself so?
You see, that's why we're here, my dear boy, to discuss why this album can be viewed in some people's opinion as a jazz masterpiece. To
So
me, listening to it for the first time, it's all brand new. So I can't really offer any in-depth musical knowledge as to what I'm hearing because it's virgin territory for me. So,
No,
right.
but you can express how it makes you feel,
yes,
how it strikes you.
it, it, it
That is the most important part, not what a mode is.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. In my opinion, I said this about other albums before. This is an album you can put on, sit back on the couch with the headphones on, or just for a night at home and listen to music with the stereo and just enjoy. Close your eyes and you're off on a journey. Okay.
Hmm.
And it's a relaxing album. It's very atmospheric, as Ken did say. For me, um, I don't, to my untrained ear, I don't find a lot of variation in terms of the musical pieces. I do find that there is a recurring theme in terms of the style of music that's on there, but it is good. And I need to listen to it some more to get more and a more to give a more in-depth analysis of the album.
So one thing that I'll suggest that may be a pointer to that is that Richard Wright from Pink Floyd and Duane Allman were highly influenced by this record.
Really?
Yeah. Duane says that the more he listened to Kind of Blue, the more he began to just sort of open up his own playing and really kind of scale new heights, with the electric guitar and what he was doing. And Richard Wright, from the things that I read, it's the approaches to, harmonics and modes that influenced a lot of the pieces that he did with Floyd. I think even as part of Echoes and in a Great Gig in the Sky, those
Yeah.
are two pieces that I think have a pretty short walk, if you will, from Kind of
Yes.
Blue to what Richard Wright did with those pieces.
Well, I mean, especially with Great Gig in the Sky, it's a gorgeous piece of music. And the chord structures on piano that he did are just amazing.
Yeah.
Just very lush and again, atmospheric. It takes you away. It
Hmm.
does. So, um,
The other thing to point out about Kind of Blue is that, when it was recorded and when it came out in 1959, that year is just stupid with the amount of watersheds of jazz albums that came out that year. Ornette Coleman, Dave Brubeck, Horace Silver, Mingus, Dizzy Gillespie, Art Blakey, Ellington, Jimmy Smith, Jackie McLean, Coleman Hawkins, and Ben Webster. They all put out albums that are either watersheds of their own career or they're major inflection points for jazz in general. I mean, Dave Brubeck, Time Out, and Ornette Coleman's Shape of Jazz to Come, just to name two. And that's not even putting Kind of Blue on that list.
so would you say that Kind of Blue is Miles Davis' watershed album?
I think so. I mean,
Okay.
you got Kind of Blue, you've got, Bitches Brew, you've got the work that he did with the second great quintet, the first great quintet. But I think universally, most people would say if you just had to pick one where Miles was at his most influential and just his where all the pieces came together with like the greatest impact, it's going to be Kind of Blue.
Okay.
In 1959, in addition to all those wonderful influences that you mentioned, I'd like to add that my mother had a major release less than a month after this album was released.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Birth canals aside, moving on.
Birth canals aside, let's talk about, I'm not even going to go to that metaphor.
No.
Anyway, when
Okay.
when when Kind of Blue came out, people didn't really get it. In fact, everyone was sort of on and on about Ornette Coleman and, what he was doing with his residency at the Five Spot in New York. You've got Leonard Bernstein showing up at his concerts, and he's walking up on stage and he's putting his ear into Charlie Hayden's bass, like near the F hole, to figure out what the heck is going on. What is making this sound that is just so different and so radical? And
So,
I mean that is where everyone was kind of at, was like, holy crap, Ornette Coleman is changing jazz.
so what you're saying, the immediacy of this of the music to grab people's attention wasn't really considered to be on this album.
Right. People were more, even though both Davis and Coleman were kind of like throwing off bebop and trying to find new ways of doing music,
Yeah.
Coleman was just much more radical about it. But but the album that grabbed hold and kind of stands the test of time is Kind of Blue, because the influence just kept building and building. I mean, um, Evans went off to his greatest trio, right after, Kind of Blue. Um, John Coltrane kind of became John Coltrane with Giant Steps and My Favorite Things and all that stuff after Kind of Blue. Um, Wynton Kelly would do a lot of stuff with Coltrane and Wes Montgomery, and he would continue to grow. I mean, um, yeah, it's amazing what, we'll go back to the birth canal, what Kind of Blue birthed and kind of went that way.
Yeah. Always back to the birth canal. Good, good reference there.
What would
Okay.
Sigmund say?
A lot
So
at
so
this
that's
point.
kind of the I mean, that's kind of the end of my prepared notes about what to say about Kind of Blue in terms of the context that it came out, what's mechanically different about it. Um, but at the end of the day, I mean, Ken, you raised it correctly, where it's not about the mechanics of how the music is constructed. It's the feel of the music upon the individual. And to me, um, Kind of Blue is an album that never ceases to give. It's like always depositing things into me, whether it's joy, peace, wonder. I mean, it just it's a giver of an album every time I listen to it.
Yeah,
And that's the mark of a good album.
I think so.
I'm gonna say it's the mark of a freaking masterpiece of an album.
Duly noted. Duly noted.
And just for context, you know, and I've said this on another episode. To me, my greatest album of all time is Steely Dan's Asia. But
No,
Kind of Blue bumps up against this constantly. And I might be coming to some inflection point in my life where they're going to switch. I don't I haven't quite made that commitment yet, but there's
but you do see that happening though.
maybe maybe so, because there's just something about this album. There's just something about Mary that, makes me want to just keep going back to it. And I want to keep going back to Asia as well. But just the I don't know, the genius that just was unleashed from Kind of Blue in this very low key way. It's it's just astounding. And
Okay.
for when back in college when I worked in a record store and people would come in and say, um, I think I want to get into jazz. What can you recommend for me? Kind of Blue was always my recommendation. If I asked them if they like things that would go towards something a little more modern, I would I might recommend Asia, or I might recommend Pat Metheny Group's Still Life Talking along with that. But
I could
that
see.
that was usually the three pack that I would recommend if someone was ready to kind of take the dive. And I never had anyone come back and say, "You son of a bitch, I spent this money and it's all crap." So,
No, that's good. That's good. I mean, you offered them a musical palette,
Yeah.
um, ranging across basically three genres that covered what you want, how you felt, and musically. So, I mean, yeah, that's there's nothing wrong with that. Music, discovering new music is never a waste in my book, you know. Um, and if you can find a type of music that speaks to you on any type of level, on any level at all, that's a good thing.
And the thing about Kind of Blue is that um, it's incredibly melodic. It's very relaxed. It is a very easy entry point. Um, but yet it's not like dumbed down. This isn't like stupid, simple music.
No,
There's a
no.
high level of artistry and experimentation on
And
this record,
an
but it's kind of
intricate
like a
interplay.
Trojan horse.
There's a lot of intricate interplay going on between the musicians on this album. And
Mhm.
for me, I'm just discovering it. So again, it is virgin territory, but
Well, I know you go through a lot of music in your days, Armando, and so
Mhm.
as I'm not a doctor, nor do I play one on TV,
Yes,
but my
thank God.
my prescription for you would be to put this on like every once in a while, even if it's once a month, and just it will get into your pores. And
Okay.
I think it'll probably unlock other, I keep using that phrase here. Um, it will open up other genres of music as well.
All right. Duly noted. Duly noted. I have to pull out the huge set that I have to grab it, but duly noted. Uh, Here's a quick question before we end this wonderful episode. There, there was an interview that Miles Davis did in the 80s about Kind of Blue, and he had mentioned in the interview that he would never want to do that kind of Moldo jazz again. Do you think that that was right for him to do, or should he have explored it some more or gone back to it?
Well, my guess is that he did continue to use modes in jazz. He just didn't do it the same way that he did in Kind of Blue. And, you know, I don't want Miles calling me an MFer with every other word, so I'm not going to tell Miles Davis what to do. You kidding me?
There you go. There you go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, jazz masterpiece. Why is Kind of Blue kind of great? I want to thank Jim Bricker for taking the reins on this show and introducing us to his view on Kind of Blue and why he thinks it is a jazz masterpiece. And I want to thank Ken Cheshire for chiming in and giving his opinion and his musical insights. To me, this is all brand new, and I've learned quite a bit, and I'm going to dive into it some more over the next few weeks.
And
Please,
because Ken brought it up earlier, and because I've just been doing the little search here, maybe we ought to do an episode on other modal jazz albums and what we think.
we will discuss that. Yes, we will. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please put down in the comments below your views on Kind of Blue. Is it a jazz masterpiece? Have you heard better? And if you have, tell us by whom. Okay? Again, there are no right or wrong answers, just opinions. So please click like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep yourselves on top of any new content I've got coming up. And we've got more shows that we're working on that we're going to bring you. And we will be back with one more episode following this. We'll see you soon. Please look after yourselves and one another. And yeah, again, music is never a waste. All right. Please keep that in mind. And there's always new avenues to discover. Once again, I'm Armando signing off for Jim and Ken. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.